Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and remember, context is everything. Media Network founder and CEO John Michael is reading a textbook, cover to cover. Today, we're on Chapter 24, Section 3. Chapter 24, Section 2, yesterday, was about the Irish potato famine, about the Australians being cultivated out of the group of criminals in England in the 1850s and sent over to Australia, which is now a segment of the population in Australia that we know as Australians, and other myriad interesting tidbits. Check it out over here. Put it on for your dog while you're away. It's nice company. This is Context is Everything Media Network. John Michael. Let's start reading. Please subscribe and like. Those are the signs for it. Chapter 24, Section 3. Thank you. Setting the scene. The news sent shockwaves through Paris. An entire French army under the Emperor Napoleon III had surrendered to the Prussians in the city of Sedan. S-E-D-A-N. Still worse, Prussian forces were now about to advance on Paris. Could the city survive? Georges Clemenceau, a young French doctor who had entered politics, rallied the people of Paris to defend their city and their homeland. "Citizens," he cried, "must France destroy himself and disappear, or shall he resume her old place in the vanguard of nations?" That was more South American, Central American maybe, than French. That's what Clemenceau concluded. "Each of us knows his duty." I'm going to stop with the accent. I only know how to do a British accent. I swear that's the only one I know how to do. I can do a couple of different British accents, but I can't do any other accent, as you can tell. Each of us know his duty. We are children of the Revolution. Let us seek inspiration in the example of our forefathers in 1792, and like them we shall conquer. Vive la France! Long live France. That's Georges Clemenceau. For 4 months, Paris did resist the German onslaught, but finally, in January 1871, the French government at Versailles was forced to accept Prussian surrender. The Franco-Prussian War ended a long period of French domination of Europe that had begun under Louis XIV. Yet, the Third Republic rose from the ashes of the Second Empire of Napoleon III. Economic growth and dramatic reforms, and the fierce nationalism expressed by Clemenceau, all played part in the shaping of modern France. You want to see Napoleon III, what he looked like? Stick around for 30 more seconds and I'll show you. France under Napoleon III, new heading. After the Revolution of 1848, Napoleon III set up a second empire. His appeal cut across lines of class and ideology. The bourgeoisie saw him as a strong leader who would restore order. His promise to end poverty gave hope to the lower classes. People of all classes were attracted to his name, under a reminder of the days when French had towered over Europe. Napoleon I. Unlike his famous uncle, however, Napoleon III would only bring France neither glory nor an empire. And this is the screw-up. That's him. Limits on liberty. I don't mean that he's a screw-up, but that's what they just said, so I thought it'd be funny. They said that he didn't bring them any prosperity, so I say, limits of liberty. On the surface, the Second Empire looked like a constitutional monarchy. In fact, Napoleon III ruled almost as a dictator, with the power to appoint his cabinet, the upper house of the legislature, and many officials, although the assembly was elected by universal male suffrage, appointed officials managed elections so that supporters of the emperor would win. Managed elections, it was written, quotation. In the 1860s, the emperor began to ease control. He lifted some censorship and gave the legislature more power. On the eve of his disastrous war with Prussia, Napoleon III even issued a new constitution that extended democratic rights. Economic growth. Like much of Europe, France prospered at mid-19th century. Napoleon III promoted investment and industry on large-scale ventures, such as railroad building and urban renewal of Paris. During this period, a French entrepreneur, Ferdinand de Lesseps, organized a building of the Suez Canal to link the Mediterranean with the Red Sea and thus the Indian Ocean. Workers enjoyed some benefits from economic growth. Napoleon legalized labor unions, extended public education to girls, and created a small public health program. Still, in France, as in other industrial nations, many people lived in great poverty. Foreign adventures. Napoleon's worst failures were in the foreign affairs. In the 1860s, he tried to place Maximilian, an Australian Habsburg prince, on the throne of Mexico. Through Maximilian, Napoleon hoped to turn Mexico into a French satellite. But after a large commitment of troops and money, the adventure failed. Mexican patriots resisted fiercely, and the United States protested. After 4 years, France withdrew its troops. Maximilian was overthrown and shot by Mexican patriots. Napoleon's successes were almost as costly as his failures. What does that mean? His successes were as costly as his failures? That means that they were good? He helped Italian nationalists defeat Austria, gaining Nice and Savoy. But this victory backfired when a united Italy emerged as a rival on France's border. Right. And though France and Britain won the Crimean War, France had little to show for its terrible losses except a small foothold in the Middle East. With war with Prussia. At this time, France grew increasingly concerned with the rise of a great rival, Prussia. The Prussian leader Otto von Bismarck shrewdly manipulated French worries to lure Napoleon into the War of 1870. As you have read, the Franco-Prussian War was a disaster for France after Napoleon III was captured at Sedan. German forces began a 4-month siege of Paris. Encircling the Prussian troops, starving Parisians were reduced to catching rats and killing circus animals for food. Challenges of the Third Republic. Challenges of the Third Republic. Well, challenges, not good. After Napoleon's capture, Napoleon III, Republicans in Paris had declared an end to the Second Empire. They set up a provisional or temporary government that evolved into France's Third Republic. In 1871, the newly elected National Assembly accepted a harsh peace with Germany. France had to surrender the provinces of Alsace and Lorraine to pay a huge sum to Germany. Alsace and Lorraine to pay a huge sum to Germany. The French France had to surrender the provinces of Alsace and Lorraine and pay a huge sum to Germany. The French burned to avenge their loss. Why would you use that language? They burned to avenge their loss. Is this English class? They longed to avenge their loss? Burned to avenge their loss. I mean, hey, I'm just not very good at reading. That's fine. The Paris Commune. In 1871, an uprising broke out in Paris. Rebels set up the Paris Commune. Like the radical government during the French Revolution, its goal was to save the Republic from royalists. Communards, as the rebels were called, included workers and socialists as well as bourgeoisie Republicans. As patriots, they rejected the harsh peace that National Assembly had signed with Germany. Radicals dreamed of creating a new socialist order. The National Assembly ordered the Commune to disband. Then, when the Communards refused, the government sent troops to besiege Paris. For weeks, civil war raged as government troops advanced. The rebels toppled great Paris monuments and slaughtered hostages. Finally, government forces butchered some 20,000 Communards. The suppression of the Paris Commune left bitter memories and that deepened social division within France. If I'm being honest with you, I zoned out while I was reading that. But it sounds, based off that last sentence, like that was pretty bad. Government structure. Despite its shaky beginnings, the Third Republic remained in place for 70 years. The new republic had two House legislature. The powerful lower house and the Chamber of Deputies was elected by universal male suffrage. Together with the Senate, it elected the President of the Republic. However, he had little power and served mostly as a figurehead. Real power was in the hands of the Premier, or Prime Minister. Unlike Britain, with its two-party system, France had many parties, reflecting the wide splits within the country. Among them were divine right royalists, constitutional monarchists, moderate republicans, and radicals. With so many parties, no single party could win majority in the legislature. In order to govern, politicians had to form coalitions or alliances of various parties. Once a coalition controlled enough votes, it could then name premier and form a cabinet. Multi-party system and coalition government are common in Europe. Such alliances allow citizens to vote for a party that most nearly matches their own beliefs. Coalition governments, however, have often been unstable. If one party desires a coalition, the government might lose its majority in its legislature. The government then falls, and new elections must be held. In the first 10 years of the Third Republic, 50 different coalition governments were formed and fell. Scandals. Despite frequent changes of government, France made economic progress. It paid Germany the huge sum required by the peace treaty and expanded its overseas empire. But in the 1880s and 1890s, a series of political scandals shook public trust in the government. One crisis erupted when a popular minister of war, General Georges Boulazier, rallied royalists and ultra-nationalists eager for revenge on Germany. Accused of plotting to overthrow the Republic, Boulazier fled to Belgium and later committed suicide. In another scandal, a nephew of the president was caught selling nominations for the Legion of Honor, France's highest award. The president was forced to resign. Well, that's not good. New heading. Ouch. New heading. And here we are. The Dreyfus Affair. The most divisive scandal began in 1894 when a high-ranking army officer, Alfred Dreyfus, was accused of spying for Germany. At his military trial, neither Dreyfus nor his lawyer was allowed to see the evidence against him. The injustice was rooted in anti-Semitism. The military elite detested Dreyfus, the first Jew to reach such a high position in the army. Although Dreyfus proclaimed his innocence, he was convicted and condemned to life imprisonment on Devil's Island, a desolate penal colony off the coast of South America. That's no good. Although the weather should be temperate. By 1896, new evidence pointed to still another officer, Ferdinand Esterhazy, as a spy. Still, the army refused to grant Dreyfus a new trial. Deep divisions. The Dreyfus Affair was, as it's called, scarred French politics and society for decades. Royalists, ultranationalists, and church officials charged Dreyfus supporters, or Dreyfusards, with undermining France. Paris echoed the cries of "Long live the army!" and "Death to traitors!" Dreyfusards, mostly liberals and Republicans, upheld ideals of justice and equality in the face of massive public anger. In 1898, French novelist Émile Zola joined in the battle. In an article headlined "J'accuse," I accuse, he charged the army and government with suppressing the truth. As a result, Zola was convicted of libel, or the knowing publication of false and damaging statements. He fled into exile. Libel doesn't exist anymore, I don't think. And if it does, it's kind of confusing how it's not called into question more often. Slowly, though, the Dreyfusards made progress. They revealed that the evidence against Dreyfus was forged. In 1906, a French court finally cleared Dreyfus of all charges and restored his honors. That move was a victory for justice, but the political scars of Dreyfus Affair took longer to heal. Calls for a Jewish state. The Dreyfus case reflected a rise in anti-Semitism in Europe. The Enlightenment and the French Revolution had spread ideas about religious toleration. In Western Europe, some Jews had gained jobs in government, universities, and other areas of life. A few were successful in banking and business, though most struggled to survive in the ghettos of Eastern Europe or slums of Western Europe. And by the late 1800s, however, anti-Semitism was again on the rise. Anti-Semitism were often members of the lower middle class who felt insecure in their social and economic positions. Steeped in the new nationalist fever, they adopted an aggressive intolerance for outsiders and a violent hatred for Jews. The Dreyfus case and the pogroms in Russia stirred Theodor Herzl, a Hungarian Jewish journalist living in France. He called for Jews to form their own separate state, where they would have the rights denied to them in European countries. Herzl helped launch the modern Zionism movement, a movement devoted to rebuilding a Jewish state in Palestine. Many Jews had kept alive this dream since the Roman destruction of Jerusalem. In 1897, Herzl organized the first Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland. Now, hot take, I'm pretty sure Zionism is very, very, very bad. Not that Jews are bad. Jews are great. But I'm pretty sure the Zionist movement is entirely bad. Reforms in France. And could I be wrong? Yes. What is my evidence based on? I think I heard it a couple of times, and why should you trust me? You really shouldn't. But just to put it in your ear, just how commercials put something in your ear, like you need a new car, you hear a commercial and you think, you know what, maybe I do need a new car. If you hear it enough times, I'm just going to say it so that you hear it one more time. I'm pretty sure the Zionist movement is entirely bad for humanity, and it is not looking for the greater good of anybody. But Jews are great. I have absolutely nothing against the Jewish faith and people of the Jewish faith, but the Zionist movement, not good. Reforms in France. I said all that with my silly sunglasses on. Isn't that funny? Well, it kind of shows you what the purpose of this channel is. It's more a background noise with silly sunglasses on. And sometimes I'll say stuff that I think. Have I thought about it too much? No. Reforms in France. Though shaken by the Dreyfus Affair, France achieved serious reforms in the early 1900s. The Dreyfus Affair, France achieved serious reforms in the early 1900s. Like Britain, France passed laws regulating wages, hours, and safety conditions for workers. It set up a system of free public elementary school. Creating public schools was also part of the campaign to reduce the power of the Roman Catholic Church, which controlled education, separating church and state. Like Germany, France tried to end church involvement in government. Republicans viewed the church as a conservative force that opposed progressive policies. In the Dreyfus Affair, it had backed the army and ultranationalists, it being the church, I believe. The government closed church schools along with many convents and monasteries. In 1905, it passed a law to separate church and state and stopped paying the salaries of the clergy. Catholics, Protestants, and Jews enjoyed freedom of worship, but none had any special treatment from the government. Women's rights. Under the Napoleonic Code, French women had few rights. Women could not even control their own property. By the 1890s, a growing women's rights movement sought legal reforms. It made some gains, such as in 1896, law giving married women the right to their own earnings. In 1909, Jean-Elisabeth Schmahl, Schmahl, founded the French Union of Women's Suffrage. Rejecting the radical tactics used in Britain, Schmahl favored legal protests. Yet, even liberal men were reluctant to grant women suffrage. They feared that women would vote for church and conservative causes. In the end, French women did not win the vote until after World War II. Thank you for being here. I appreciate your time. A little pat on the head for the puppy if you put this on for a dog while you're away. Again, Context is Everything Media Network, the first choice in company for your dog while you're away, doing your necessary errands that don't involve your dog. So just pick a playlist, let it roll, and I will keep your dog company in digital spirit. Thank you. Looking ahead, by 1914, France was the largest democratic country in Europe with the constitution that protected basic rights. France's economy was generally prosperous, and its overseas empire was second only to that of Britain. Yet the outlook was not all smooth. Coalition governments rose and fell at the slightest pressure. To the east loomed the industrial might of Germany. Many French citizens were itching for a chance to avenge their defeat in the Franco-Prussian War and liberate the lost provinces of Alsace and Lorraine. That chance came in 1914 when all of Europe exploded into World War I. Thank you for being here. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your attention. I hope you enjoy the weather, albeit overcast where I am. It's still kind of nice. God bless. Goodbye.